Get your hands off those controls, or I swear to God you'll be leaving this airport in handcuffs." The shriek echoed through the multi-million-dollar cockpit. She didn't see a decorated Air Force veteran. She didn't see the chief pilot of Halloway Aviation. All Jessica Corwin saw was a black man, sitting in a seat she believed he didn't belong in. She thought she was protecting the plane. She thought she was the hero. But she had no idea that the man she was spitting insults at was the only person standing between her and total ruin. She was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, and by the time the phone call was made, it would be too late to say sorry. This is the story of how arrogance met its match and karma came knocking at 30,000 feet. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, hammering against the aluminum skin of the Gulfstream G700 like handfuls of gravel. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The kind of night where the tarmac is a blur of orange safety lights and miserable ground crews trying to keep their heads down. Inside the climate-controlled silence of the cockpit, Captain Marcus Sterling exhaled slowly, dubbing a tired hand over his face. At 52, Marcus had spent more of his life in the sky than on the ground. He had flown sorties over Iraq, piloted commercial wide bodies for Delta, and now he sat at the helm of one of the most expensive private jets in the world. He adjusted the cuff of his pristine white shirt, glancing at the Breitling Navitimer on his wrist, a gift from the man who owned this plane, Preston Halloway. Tonight was a ghost flight. No passengers, just a repositioning leg from New York to London to pick up Halloway's family for a funeral. The mood was somber. Marcus had opted to do the pre-flight checks himself, sending his co-pilot, a young man named David, to grab coffee and file the final flight plan. Marcus reached up to toggle the overhead panel, his movements fluid and practiced. He loved this machine. The G700 was a beast, and he knew every rivet, every wire, every quirk. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the auxiliary power unit, APU, like a serrated knife. Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the hydraulic pump switch. He turned his seat slowly. Standing in the cockpit doorway was a woman he hadn't met before. She was dressed in the impeccable navy blue uniform of the contract cabin crew agency that Halloway Aviation sometimes used when their regular staff was on leave. She was blonde, her hair pulled back in a bun so tight it pulled at her eyes, which were currently narrowed in a mix of confusion and hostility. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep, calm baritone. The woman stepped fully into the cockpit, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. She crossed her arms, scanning him from his short-cropped hair to his black tie. "I think the question is, can I help you because I know for a fact the cleaning crew finished an hour ago?" Marcus blinked, a faint smile touching his lips. It wasn't the first time he'd been mistaken for ground crew, though usually it happened when he was wearing a high-vis vest, not his captain's bars. "I'm not the cleaning crew, miss." "Corwin. Jessica Corwin. I am the lead flight attendant for this leg," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger at the door. "And we are on a strict schedule. I need to prep the galley. I don't know who let you on board to take selfies in the cockpit, but you need to leave, now." Marcus shifted fully in his seat, the leather creaking. He gestured to the 4 gold stripes on his epaulets. "Miss Corwin, I think there's a misunderstanding. I'm Captain Sterling. I'm flying the plane tonight." Jessica let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor, filled only with derision. She stepped closer, invading his personal space, the scent of expensive cloying perfume filling the cockpit. "Look," she said, dropping her voice to a patronizing tone, as if speaking to a slow child. I've flown with Halloway Aviation for 3 years as a contractor. The pilots are Captain Miller or Captain O'Malley. I have never seen you before. And let's be real, her eyes raked over him, lingering on his skin color, with a look of distaste she didn't bother to hide. You don't exactly look like the kind of pilot Mr. Halloway hires. The air in the cockpit seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's smile vanished. He had dealt with racism his entire career, from subtle jabs in the Air Force to surprised looks from first-class passengers. But this was blatant. It was aggressive. "And what kind of pilot does Mr. Halloway hire?" Marcus asked softly, his voice dangerous. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Professional ones. Look, I don't know if you stole that uniform from a costume shop, or if you're some maintenance guy playing pretend, but this is a $50 million aircraft, not a toy. I'm not going to lose my bonus because some affirmative action hire or trespasser delayed our takeoff. Get out." Marcus took a breath, centering himself. He reached for his breast pocket to retrieve his ID badge. "If you'll let me show you my credentials." "I don't want to see your fake ID," Jessica yelled, slapping her hand against the bulkhead. "I am calling airport security right now. You are trespassing on a private aircraft. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in?" "Miss Corwin, you are making a mistake," Marcus said, his voice firming up. "I suggest you check the crew manifest on your tablet before you embarrass yourself." "I checked the manifest," she lied, her face flushing red. "It says Captain Sterling, and I know for a fact that Sterling is—" She paused, realizing she didn't actually know what Sterling looked like, only that the name sounded distinguished. "Well, he certainly isn't you." She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling with rage. "I'm calling the Port Authority. You have 5 seconds to leave before I have you dragged off this plane." Marcus turned back to the instrument panel. He flipped the hydraulic switch he had been reaching for earlier. "Call them," he said calmly, not looking at her. "But make sure you spell my name right for the report." Jessica stared at his back, her mouth agape. The audacity, the sheer arrogance. In her mind, the narrative was clear. This man was an intruder, a fraud. She had seen it on the news, people sneaking onto planes. She was protecting the asset. She was going to be a hero to Preston Halloway. She stormed out of the cockpit, pulling the heavy curtain shut with a violent swish, and marched to the galley phone. But instead of the internal line, she dialed 911 on her cell. "Yes, I'm at the General Aviation Terminal Hangar 4, Halloway Aviation. There is a man in the cockpit of the G700 refusing to leave. He's aggressive. I think he might be intoxicated. He's wearing a fake pilot's uniform." She paused, listening to the dispatcher, her eyes darting back to the curtain. "Yes, he's African American. Large build. I feel threatened. Please hurry." She hung up, a smug smile creeping onto her face. She fixed her scarf, checked her reflection in the galley mirror, and waited. 10 minutes later, the sound of heavy boots clanking up the metal air stairs broke the tension. 2 Port Authority officers, soaked from the rain, ducked into the cabin. One was a young rookie looking nervous. The other was Officer Miller, a burly man with a thick moustache and a face that looked like he was already done with his shift. "Where is he?" Miller grunted, shaking rain off his tactical vest. Jessica rushed forward, playing the damsel perfectly. She clasped her hands together, her voice trembling slightly, an award-winning performance. "Oh, thank God you're here. He's in the cockpit. He's touching all the controls. I asked him to leave and he lunged at me." Miller's hand dropped to his taser. "He attacked you. He moved aggressively," Jessica clarified, adding just enough ambiguity to cover herself, but enough spice to incense the cops. "He claims he's the pilot, but he won't show ID, and he's not on the list I have. I think he's trying to steal the plane, or worse." Miller nodded grimly. "Stay here, ma'am." The two officers moved down the short hallway. Miller threw the curtain back. Marcus was still in the pilot's seat, entering waypoints into the flight management system. He didn't look up immediately. "Hey, hands where I can see 'em," Miller barked, his voice booming in the small space. Marcus sighed. He lifted his hands slowly from the keypad palms open and turned his head. "Officers, I'm glad you're here. Maybe you can explain to the flight attendant that— Shut up out of the seat. Now!" Miller shouted, his hand unholstering the taser and pointing it at Marcus's chest. "Slowly, or I will light you up." Marcus froze. He knew this drill. He knew that as a black man in America, even with 4 stripes on his shoulder and a 6-figure salary, this situation could go deadly wrong in a heartbeat. The calm authority of the captain vanished, replaced by the survival instinct of a man facing a loaded weapon. "I am moving slowly," Marcus said, his voice measured. "I am unbuckling the harness." "Do it." Marcus clicked the release. He stood up, towering over Miller in the cramped space. "Turn around, hands on the bulkhead," Miller ordered. "Officer, my wallet is in my flight bag right there," Marcus said, nodding toward the side pouch. "It has my FAA license, my company ID, and my driver's license." "I said turn around." Miller shoved Marcus hard against the wall. From the cabin, Jessica watched with a vindictive thrill. She saw the rough treatment, the way Miller kicked Marcus's legs apart to search him. "See," she thought, "I was right. Only criminals get treated like that." "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, his cheek pressed against the cold plastic of the cockpit wall. "I am Captain Marcus Sterling. Check the flight plan filed with the tower." "We'll check everything downtown," Miller grunted, cuffing Marcus's hands behind his back. The metal clicked tight, too tight. "Right now, you're under arrest for trespassing and disorderly conduct." "Disorderly?" Marcus repeated, wincing as his arms were wrenched up. "I haven't raised my voice once." "The lady says you were aggressive." "That's enough for me," Miller spat. He grabbed Marcus by the collar of his uniform. "Let's go." They marched him out of the cockpit. As they passed the galley, Jessica was leaning against the counter, sipping a bottle of water. She lowered the bottle, a smirk playing on her lips. "I told you to leave," she whispered as he was shoved past her. "Now look at you." Marcus stopped planting his feet, despite the officer's shove. He locked eyes with her. His gaze wasn't fearful. It was filled with a terrifying, icy calm. "Jessica," he said, using her name for the first time without the title. "You have just ended your career. I hope it was worth it. Keep moving." Miller shoved him toward the door. Jessica laughed. "My career? Honey, I'm getting a commendation for this. Have fun in jail." They dragged him down the stairs into the pouring rain. A patrol car was waiting, lights flashing, illuminating the wet tarmac in strobe light bursts of red and blue. Ground crew members stopped what they were doing, watching in shock, as the captain of the G700 was stuffed into the back of a police cruiser like a common thief. David, the young co-pilot, came running around the corner of the hangar, holding a tray of coffees. He stopped dead in his tracks, dropping the tray. The cups exploded on the ground. "Marcus!" David screamed, sprinting toward the car. "Hey, what are you doing? That's the captain." Officer Miller held up a hand. "Back off, kid. This guy's a trespasser." "Trespasser? Are you insane?" David yelled, panic rising in his voice. "That's Marcus Sterling. He's the chief pilot. We're wheels up in 30 minutes. Miller paused, looking at the hysterical young white man in a pilot's uniform, then back at the black man in the back seat. Doubt flickered in his eyes for a nanosecond, but his pride squashed it. "We got a report from the lead flight attendant that he's an intruder. We're sorting it out at the station. If he's who he says he is, he'll be out in an hour." "An hour?" David looked at his watch. "We don't have an hour. Mr. Halloway is waiting in London. You take him away, and this plane is grounded." Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down. "David, what are you doing? That man is an imposter. I saved us." David looked up at her, his face a mask of horror. "Jessica, tell me you didn't do this. Tell me you didn't just have the boss's best friend arrested." Jessica's smile faltered. "Best friend?" The patrol car doors slammed shut. The engine roared and the vehicle peeled away, splashing water onto David's trousers. Inside the car, Marcus shifted his shoulders, trying to alleviate the pain in his wrists. He took a deep breath. He wasn't going to argue with the cops anymore. He needed to make one phone call, and when he made it, the earth was going to shake. The holding cell at the JFK Port Authority precinct was a stark contrast to the luxury of the Gulf Stream. It smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. They had taken Marcus's belt, his shoelaces, and his tie. He sat on the metal bench, still in his white shirt and epaulets, looking like a king in exile. He had been processed, fingerprinted, and mugshot. The humiliation was burning in his gut, a slow, hot coal. But Marcus was a disciplined man. He didn't rage. He planned. Officer Miller walked by the cell, looking a little less confident than before. He had tried to call Halloway Aviation's main line, but it was after hours. No answer. "You get your one call," Miller said, unlocking the cell door, but leaving the bars between them. He handed Marcus a heavy corded phone through the gap. "Make it quick." Marcus took the receiver. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call his wife. He dialed a private, unlisted number that he knew by heart. It rang twice. "This is Halloway," a voice answered. It was groggy. It was 5:00 a.m. in London. "Preston," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but the weight of the night was in it. There was a pause on the line, the rustling of sheets. Then the voice became instantly alert. "Marcus, why are you calling me? You should be in the air. Is there a problem with the bird?" "The bird is fine, Preston," Marcus said, staring directly at Officer Miller, who was leaning against the wall, picking his teeth. "I'm not. What's going on? I'm currently in a holding cell at the Port Authority precinct at JFK." "You're what?" The shout was so loud, Marcus had to pull the phone away from his ear. "Your contract flight attendant, a Miss Jessica Corwin, decided I didn't look like a pilot. She refused to look at my ID. She called the police and told them I was a trespasser and that I attacked her. I was dragged off the plane in handcuffs in front of the ground crew." Silence. A long, terrifying silence. Officer Miller stopped picking his teeth. He looked at Marcus, then at the phone. He started to get a bad feeling. "Marcus," Preston Halloway's voice was dangerously low now. "Are you hurt?" "Bruised wrists, nothing broken." "But Preston, she humiliated me. She called me a maintenance worker. She implied, well, you know what she implied." "I'm coming," Preston said. "You're in London, Preston." "I don't care. I'm taking the Challenger. I'll be there in 6 hours. But you won't be in that cell for 6 hours. Put the officer on the phone." "He might not want to talk to you," Marcus said dryly. "Put him on, now!" Marcus held the phone out through the bars. "Officer, it's for you." Miller scoffed. "Who is it?" "Your bail bondsman." It's the owner of the airline, and the man who signs your precinct's donation checks for the annual gala." Miller's face went pale. He walked over slowly and took the phone. "Yeah, Officer Miller speaking." Marcus watched as all the color drained from Miller's face. His eyes went wide. He stood up straighter, almost snapping to attention. "Yes, sir. I didn't know. The flight attendant, she was very specific that—" "No, sir." "Yes, sir. I understand. Immediately." "Yes, sir. I will personally drive him back." Miller handed the phone back to Marcus with a trembling hand. He fumbled with his keys, dropping them once before jamming them into the lock. "Captain Sterling," Miller stammered, swinging the door open. There's been a terrible mistake. Please come out. We'll get your things." Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't thank him. He simply stepped out of the cell, adjusting his cuffs. "I'm not going anywhere until I get my tie back," Marcus said coldly. "And then you're going to take me back to that plane. I have a flight attendant to fire." The drive back to the private aviation terminal was excruciatingly slow, a stark contrast to the frantic speed at which Officer Miller had driven away just 40 minutes earlier. The rain had intensified, turning the tarmac of JFK into a shimmering black ocean, reflecting the strobe lights of the airport towers. Inside the patrol car, the air was thick with unspoken tension. The heater was blasting, drying the rain on Marcus's uniform, but the warmth did nothing to thaw the icy atmosphere. Marcus sat in the front seat, this time, a small, terrified courtesy offered by Officer Miller after he had practically begged Marcus not to file a formal complaint immediately. "Captain Sterling." Miller broke the silence, his voice cracking slightly. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. I need to say that I was acting on the information provided. The caller, she was hysterical. She said she was threatened. In this day and age, with terrorism and all." Marcus didn't look at him. He stared out the window at the passing hangars, his jaw set in stone. "The information provided was that a black man was in a cockpit. You didn't see a threat, Miller. You saw a stereotype, and you were more than happy to put your boot on its neck." I didn't mean it like that," Miller stammered, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cold night. "You wouldn't have dragged a white man in a pilot's uniform out of that seat without looking at his license first." Marcus said, his voice quiet, but hitting with the force of a sledgehammer. "You would have asked him for his side of the story. You would have checked the flight log. You treated me like a criminal because it was the path of least resistance for your bias." Miller swallowed hard, unable to respond. He knew it was true. The phone call from Preston Holloway had been more than just an angry billionaire venting. It was a promise of career annihilation. Holloway had mentioned lawyers, the police commissioner, and a civil rights lawsuit that would make Miller's pension disappear faster than smoke. As the car approached the Holloway aviation hangar, Marcus saw the Gulfstream G700 sitting majestically under the floodlights. It was a beautiful machine, sleek and powerful, worth $75 million. And standing at the top of the air stairs, silhouetted against the cabin light, was Jessica Corwin. She was pacing. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the agitation in her body language. She checked her watch, looked at her phone, and tapped her foot. She was annoyed. She wasn't worried about the man she had sent to jail. She was worried about her schedule. She was worried about her on-time bonus. Down on the tarmac, David, the co-pilot, was sitting on a toolbox, his head in his hands. He looked up as the cruiser approached, and relief washed over his face so visibly it was heartbreaking. He jumped up, ignoring the rain, and ran towards the car before it even came to a full stop. Miller put the car in park. "Captain, about the report." "Unlock the door," Marcus commanded. The lock clicked. Marcus stepped out into the rain. He didn't run. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his tie, which Miller had sheepishly returned to him at the station, and walked with the deliberate, heavy grace of a man who owned the ground he walked on. "Marcus," David yelled, rushing over. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop them. I called operations, I called dispatch. Nobody picked up. I was about to drive to the station myself when Miller called the tower to say he was returning." Marcus placed a calm hand on the young man's shoulder. "It's okay, David. You did what you could. Is the flight plan still active?" "Yes, but we're burned on our slot time. We have to request a new clearance. We're going to be at least 90 minutes late getting to London." David looked up at the plane, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's still up there, Marcus. She thinks she's a hero. She's been bragging to the fuel truck driver that she secured the asset." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Secured the asset." He repeated the absurdity of the phrase, tasting bitter in his mouth. "She has no idea who you are," David said. "I tried to tell her. I told her you were the chief pilot." She laughed. She said I was covering for the help. "The help," Marcus murmured. A dark, cold smile touched his lips. Not a smile of humor, but of impending reckoning. "Go do the walk-around, David. Check the landing gear pins. I'll handle the cabin." "Marcus, she's vicious. Maybe we should just wait for the police to remove her." "No," Marcus said, walking towards the stairs. "Officer Miller isn't going to remove her. I am." He began the ascent. The metal steps rang out under his dress shoes. Clang, 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 like the tolling of a bell. Inside the cabin, Jessica heard the footsteps. She assumed it was the police returning to get a statement, or maybe David coming back to beg for forgiveness for his outburst earlier. She was in the galley vigorously polishing a crystal tumbler that didn't need polishing. She had already mentally drafted the email she would send to the agency incident report, successfully identified and neutralized unauthorized access to Flight 808, requesting hazard pay. She turned around, a practiced, professional smile plastered on her face, ready to greet the officer. "Did you book him? I hope you gave him a—" The words died in her throat. Standing in the entryway, dripping wet, but looking more imposing than any man she had ever met, was Marcus Sterling. He wasn't in handcuffs. He wasn't cowering. He was standing tall, filling the frame of the door, staring at her with eyes that looked like absolute zero. Jessica blinked, her brain misfiring. How did you get out?" She sputtered, her indignation rising instantly to cover her confusion. "You escaped. Oh my God, officer!" She lunged past Marcus, looking down the stairs. She saw Officer Miller standing by his car, watching. He didn't move. He didn't reach for his gun. He just looked down at his boots. "Officer Miller, he's back! Arrest him!" She shrieked, her voice cracking. Marcus didn't move an inch. He simply reached out and closed the main cabin door. The heavy mechanical thud and the whir of the locking pins engaging sealed them in the quiet luxury of the jet. "You are not going to arrest anyone, Jessica," Marcus said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice pilots used when an engine caught fire, controlled, precise, and authoritative. Jessica backed up against the galley counter, clutching the crystal glass like a weapon. "Don't come near me. This is kidnapping. I have pepper spray in my bag." "Sit down," Marcus said. "I will not." I said, "Sit down." The command whipped through the air like a lash. Jessica flinched. For the first time, a seed of genuine fear took root in her gut. Not because she thought he was a violent criminal, but because for a split second, she recognized the tone. It wasn't the tone of a thug. It was the tone of a boss. She sat on the jump seat, her legs trembling. "You're going to jail for a long time," she whispered, trying to reassure herself. "Mr. Holloway will destroy you." Marcus walked past her, ignoring her completely. He went to the cockpit, grabbed his flight bag, and pulled out his iPad. He tapped the screen a few times, bringing up the crew manifest that Jessica had refused to look at. He walked back to her and held the screen in front of her face. "Read it," he said. Jessica looked away. "I don't need to read your fake. Read it." She looked. The screen was bright in the dim cabin. Flight G700-808, JFK, LHR, Captain Marcus A. Sterling, License ATP 4449201, Status Chief Pilot, Director of Operations. Her eyes scanned the photo next to the name. It was him. A slightly younger version, maybe, but undeniably him. The same sharp jawline, the same intense eyes. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her brain scrambled to find an exit, an excuse, a way to spin this back to her advantage. You hacked the system," she stammered, looking up at him with desperate defiance. "That's it. You hacked the iPad. You expect me to believe that you are the Director of Operations for Holloway Aviation." Marcus slowly retracted the iPad. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You just can't do it, can you? You can't accept that a black man could be in charge of you. Even with the proof right in front of your face, your prejudice is stronger than your logic." "It's not prejudice," she yelled, standing up. "It's profiling. It's safety. You don't look like a pilot. You look like a bouncer or a rapper." "I was protecting the plane." "You were protecting your ego," Marcus said, "and in doing so you have insulted the man who owns this plane, the man who built this company, and the man who signs your agency's contract." "I did not insult Mr. Holloway," she cried. "I did this for him." "No," Marcus said. "You insulted me." Before she could respond, Marcus's phone rang. It wasn't a standard ringtone. It was a harsh, jarring buzz. He looked at the screen. "It's for you," Marcus said, extending the phone toward her. Jessica stared at the device. "Who is it?" "It's the one phone call I made while I was in the cell you put me in," Marcus said. "Take it." Jessica's hand shook as she reached for the phone. The screen displayed a name that made her blood run cold. "Incoming call, Victoria St. Clair." Victoria St. Clair was not a random manager. She was the CEO of Elite Sky staffing the agency that employed Jessica. She was a woman known in the industry as the Iron Lady of Aviation. She didn't make personal calls to flight attendants. Ever. Unless someone had died, or someone was about to wish they had. Jessica put the phone to her ear. "Hello, Miss St. Clair." The voice on the other end was so loud that Marcus could hear it clearly from where he stood. It was a voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Jessica Corwin, put me on speaker, now!" Jessica fumbled with the button, her fingernails clicking against the glass screen. "You're on speaker, ma'am." "Jessica." Victoria's voice filled the small cabin, bouncing off the mahogany veneers. "Do you know who I just got off the phone with?" I can explain." Jessica started, her voice rising in pitch. "There was a security breach. I handled it. There was a man in the cockpit." "Shut up," Victoria screamed. "I just spent 20 minutes on the phone with Preston Holloway. Do you know who Preston Holloway is?" "He is our biggest client. He accounts for 30% of our annual revenue. And do you know what he told me?" Jessica was silent, tears welling up in her eyes. The reality was crashing down on her, cracking the foundation of her arrogance. "He told me," Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "that you had his best friend arrested. He told me that you racially profiled his chief pilot, a decorated Air Force veteran, and had him dragged off the tarmac like a criminal. He told me that because of you, his father's funeral procession is now in jeopardy, because the flight is delayed." "I didn't know," Jessica sobbed. "He didn't show me ID. He was rude. He didn't look like a pilot." "He didn't look like a pilot," Victoria repeated, the disgust dripping from every syllable. "Jessica Marcus Sterling has been the face of Halloway Aviation for 15 years. If you had bothered to read the briefing packet I sent you, the one you are required to read before every flight, you would have seen his bio on page 2. Did you read the briefing, Jessica?" Jessica froze. She hadn't. She never did. She usually skimmed the catering menu and the passenger preferences and ignored the technical crew details. She assumed pilots were interchangeable. I glanced at it. "You are a liability," Victoria said. "Mr. Halloway has given me an ultimatum. Either you are off that plane in 5 minutes, or he cancels his contract with our entire agency. That is a $12 million contract, Jessica. Do you think I am going to lose $12 million because you are a racist, incompetent—" "Please, Victoria, I can fix this," Jessica pleaded, reaching out to grab Marcus's arm, but he stepped back as if she were contagious. "I'll apologize. Captain Sterling. I'm so sorry, I was just stressed. Please tell her." Marcus looked at her. His expression was unmoved. "It's too late for apologies, Miss Corwin. You crossed the line when you lied to the police. You said I was aggressive. You said I attacked you. That's a felony. You tried to ruin my life." "He's right," Victoria snapped over the speaker. "Jessica, you are fired, effective immediately. You are blacklisted from elite Sky staffing, and I will personally make sure every other agency in the tri-state area knows exactly why. You will never work on a private jet again. You'll be lucky if you can get a job handing out peanuts on a budget airline." "You can't do this," Jessica screamed, the panic taking over. "I'm in the middle of the airport. It's raining. How am I supposed to get home?" "I don't care if you swim," Victoria said coldly. "Get off that plane, now, or I will have airport security remove you for trespassing, and unlike Captain Sterling, you actually are a trespasser now." The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the rain drumming on the fuselage and Jessica's ragged breathing. She looked at Marcus, her mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect bun now looking severe and ridiculous. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic realization that she was nobody. She had tried to punch down, thinking she was punching a servant, only to realize she had punched a wall of solid steel. "Get your things," Marcus said quietly. "Please," she whispered. "Captain, I have rent. I have a car payment. Please don't let her fire me." Marcus sighed. He walked over to the main cabin door. He remembered the feeling of the handcuffs clicking on his wrists. He remembered the humiliation of being walked past the ground crew. He remembered the fear that for a moment he might not make it home to his wife. "You didn't care about my job when you called 911, Marcus said. "You didn't care about my life when you told the police I was aggressive. You wanted to exercise power over me. Well, Jessica, this is what power actually looks like. It looks like accountability." He pressed the button to lower the air stairs. The mechanical whine filled the cabin. The cool, wet air rushed in. Get off my plane. Jessica grabbed her purse. She tried to muster some dignity, straightening her jacket, but her hands were shaking too much. She walked to the door. At the bottom of the stairs, Officer Miller was still waiting. He looked up as the stairs lowered. He expected to see Marcus coming down again, maybe to go back to the station. Instead, he saw Jessica Corwin, pale and trembling, descending the stairs with her bag. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at Miller. "Officer Miller!" Marcus called out, his voice projecting over the rain. Miller snapped to attention. "Yes, Captain." "This woman is no longer an employee of Halloway Aviation. She is in a restricted area without a valid security badge. I'd like you to escort her off the premises." Miller blinked. The irony hit him like a physical blow. He looked at Jessica, then back at Marcus. He knew he had to redeem himself. He had to show Marcus and Halloway that he was on the right side now. Miller stepped forward, his face hardening. "Ma'am, let's go. Step this way." Jessica looked at Miller, stunned. "But we're on the same side. You arrested him." "I made a mistake," Miller grunted, taking her arm, not gently. "I'm not making another one. Let's go. You're trespassing." Marcus watched from the top of the stairs as the woman who had tried to destroy him was led away into the rain, not in handcuffs, but in total disgrace. She was crying, arguing, flailing, but nobody was listening. The ground crew who had seen the earlier arrest were now watching with wide eyes, realizing the massive shift in power that had just occurred. David came bounding up the stairs, panting. "She's gone. Is she gone?" "She's gone," Marcus said, turning back into the warmth of the cabin. "Pull up the stairs, David. We have a funeral to get to." "Yes, Captain," David said, rushing to the controls. Marcus walked into the cockpit. He sat in the left seat, his seat. He ran his hands over the yoke, feeling the familiar texture. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of leather and avionics. He was back where he belonged. He picked up the radio mic. "Kennedy Ground. This is Gulfstream 700808. We are ready to taxi with information. Romeo, apologies for the delay. We had a minor personnel issue. Gulfstream 808, Kennedy Ground." The controller's voice crackled back. "No problem, Captain. You're cleared to taxi to runway 31 left. Good to hear your voice, Marcus." "Good to be here," Marcus said. He pushed the throttles forward. The Rolls-Royce engines roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated through his bones. As the plane began to move, leaving the drama, and the rain behind Marcus felt the weight lift off his shoulders. Karma had been served. The Gulfstream G700 tore down runway 31. Left the wet pavement blurring into a streak of grey beneath the landing lights. At 140 knots, Marcus pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose lifted, and the $75 million aircraft defied gravity, piercing the low-hanging storm clouds that had made the night so miserable. "Positive rate," David called out, his voice still shaky but regaining its professional cadence. "Gear up," Marcus commanded. The hydraulic thump of the landing gear, retracting into the belly of the plane, was the final punctuation mark on the incident at JFK. They were airborne. They were leaving the jurisdiction of Officer Miller and the shrieking accusations of Jessica Corwin. But as they punched through the cloud layer and emerged into the dazzling, star-filled clarity of the upper atmosphere, Marcus didn't feel the usual relief that came with flight. His wrists throbbed. He looked down at his hands resting on the throttle quadrant. There were red, angry indentations where the handcuffs had dug into his skin. He engaged the autopilot at 10,000 feet and leaned back, letting out a breath he felt he had been holding for 2 hours. The cockpit was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of the avionics screens. The hum of the engines was a comforting white noise, a barrier against the chaos of the world below. "Marcus," David said softly from the right seat. He didn't look over. He kept his eyes on the primary flight display. I don't know what to say." Marcus stared straight ahead at the horizon, where the faint glow of Boston was visible off the port wing. "You don't have to say anything, David. You did your job." "I didn't," David countered, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have tackled that cop. I should have stood in front of the car. I watched them put you in the back like a criminal, and I just stood there holding a tray of spilled coffee." Marcus turned his head slowly. "If you had tackled that cop, David, we'd both be in jail right now, and Mr. Halloway would be stranded. You used your head. You called the right people." "It's not right," David said, gripping the armrest. "I've flown with you for 2 years. You taught me how to handle crosswinds in a blizzard. You taught me how to negotiate with fuel vendors in Morocco. You're the best pilot I know. And she just looked at you and decided you were nobody." Marcus chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "That's the reality, David. In the cockpit, I'm the chief pilot. I'm the master of the vessel. But the second I step off this jet without the uniform, or sometimes even with the uniform, I'm just a suspect." He rubbed his wrists again. Jessica didn't see a pilot. She saw a threat. She saw someone who didn't belong in her world of luxury aviation. She thought she was the gatekeeper. "I hope she loses everything." David spat a flash of uncharacteristic anger crossing his young face. "I hope St. Clair destroys her." "She's already lost," Marcus said calmly. "She lost her dignity. She lost her career. But anger, David, resentment, that's baggage. And you know the rule about baggage on a long-range flight. Check it or leave it, David recited the old adage. Exactly. We're flying to a funeral, David. Preston just lost his father. That's real pain. What happened to me tonight? That's just Tuesday." Marcus unbuckled his harness and stood up. "I'm going to check the cabin. Make sure she didn't leave any surprises. You have the comms." "I have the comms," David said. Marcus walked back into the main cabin. It was empty, quiet, and lavish. The beige leather seats were pristine. The walnut tables were polished, but the air still felt tainted. He walked to the galley where Jessica had stood. On the counter, the crystal glass she had been polishing was still there. Next to it was her catering manifest. Marcus picked it up. It was covered in erratic scribbles notes she had made about him. Suspicious male in cockpit. Refused to vacate. Hostile. He crumpled the paper in his fist. He walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. He splashed cold water on his face. He looked tired. The grey in his beard seemed more pronounced tonight. He thought about his son, currently in his second year of law school. He had given his son the talk when he was 12. Keep your hands visible. Don't run. Say, sir. Don't argue. Tonight, Marcus had followed his own advice, and he had still ended up in a cell. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But then he remembered the look on Officer Miller's face when the phone call came. He remembered the terror in Jessica's eyes when Victoria St. Clair's voice filled the cabin. He hadn't won because he fought physically. He had won because he had built a life so undeniable, so successful, and so respected that the lie couldn't survive against it. He dried his face with a linen towel and walked back to the cockpit. He sat down, strapped in, and looked at the navigation screen. Time to destination. 5 hours, 20 minutes, David replied. Let's make up some time, Marcus said, pushing the throttles forward, slightly increasing their cruise speed to Mach 0.9d. I don't want Preston waiting in the rain. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out beneath them, a vast, dark void. They were flying at 45,000 feet higher than the commercial airliners, higher than the weather, higher than the hate. For the next 5 hours, Marcus Sterling wasn't a black man in a white world or a suspect in a holding cell. He was the captain, and up here he was untouchable. The descent into London Stansted Airport was rough. A low-pressure system was battering the UK with gale-force winds and driving rain, fitting weather for a funeral and fitting weather for the mood of the mission. Winds are gusting 40 knots, crosswind component is 30. David read from the flight management system. It's going to be bumpy. I've got at it, Marcus said, his hands steady on the controls. The G700 was buffeted by the wind, shaking violently as it dropped through the cloud layers. Rain lashed the windshield, obscuring the runway lights, until they were only 200 feet above the ground. To an amateur, it would have been terrifying. To Marcus, it was a dance he had perfected over 30 years. He crabbed the plane into the wind, fighting the drift, his feet working the rudder pedals with precise, rhythmic inputs. 50, 40, 30, the radio altimeter called out. At the last second, Marcus kicked the rudder, aligning the nose with the centerline, and planted the main gear on the wet tarmac. It was a firm, positive landing, safe, controlled, and authoritative. Spoilers up, reverse thrust, Marcus commanded. The roar of the engines slowing the massive jet filled the cabin. They turned off the active runway and taxied toward the private aviation center. Through the rain-streaked side window, Marcus saw the convoy. 3 black Range Rovers were waiting on the ramp, engines running headlights, cutting through the gloom. Standing next to the lead car, holding a large black umbrella, was a tall figure in a long trench coat. Preston Halloway. Marcus set the parking brake and shut down the engines. The silence that rushed back into the cockpit was heavy. "Good flight, David," Marcus said. "Good landing, Captain," David replied. Marcus stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked to the main door. He opened it, and the damp, cold English air hit him. He lowered the air stairs. Preston Halloway didn't wait for Marcus to come down. The billionaire aviation mogul, a man who owned skyscrapers in Dubai and shipping fleets in the Pacific, walked up the stairs to meet his pilot halfway. Preston looked tired. His eyes were red-rimmed from grief. But as he looked at Marcus, his expression shifted to one of intense concern. He didn't offer a handshake. He pulled Marcus into a tight embrace. "I am so sorry, Marcus," Preston said, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry." "It's not your fault, Preston," Marcus said, patting his friend's back. "You have a funeral to attend. Let's not worry about this now." Preston pulled back, gripping Marcus's shoulders. "No, we are worrying about it. I saw the police report Miller emailed me while you were in the air. Trespassing. Aggressive behavior. It makes me sick." "She's gone, Preston." St. Clair fired her. "Firing isn't enough," Preston said, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "I spoke to my legal team while you were crossing the Atlantic. We are filing a civil suit against the staffing agency for negligence and emotional distress. And as for Miss Corwin..." Preston turned and walked down the stairs, motioning for Marcus to follow. They stood under the shelter of the umbrella near the Range Rover. "I made a few calls," Preston said. "You know the industry is small." "You didn't have to do that," Marcus said. "I did. I called the vetting boards. I called the major commercial carriers. I made sure that her incident report, the real one, not the lies she told, is attached to her permanent record in the National Aviation Database. She won't just be banned from private jets, Marcus. She won't be able to get a job checking tickets at a gate. She is done in this industry. Period. Marcus looked out at the rainy tarmac. He thought of Jessica's face when she realized who he was. He thought of the malice in her voice when she called the police. She had tried to use the system to crush him. The system had simply crushed her back. "It's a hard lesson," Marcus said quietly. "It's a necessary one," Preston replied. "I don't tolerate racists on my payroll, and I certainly don't tolerate anyone disrespecting the man who keeps my family safe in the air." Preston opened the back door of the Range Rover. Inside sat his wife and 2 crying children. "Are you coming to the service?" Preston asked. "The family would want you there. You're one of us." Marcus smiled a genuine, warm smile this time. "I'll be there. Just let me get changed out of this uniform. I think I've had enough of wearing it for one day." 3 months later, the sun was shining in Teterboro, New Jersey. Marcus was in the cockpit of the G700 running pre-flight checks for a trip to Aspen. He was scrolling through his iPad, checking the industry news. A headline in a trade magazine caught his eye. "Major staffing agency settles discrimination. Lawsuit for $2.5 million. Elite Sky Staffing had settled with Halloway Aviation. The money at Preston's insistence had been donated to a scholarship fund for minority pilots, a fund that now bore Marcus Sterling's name. Marcus swiped to the next page. It was a forum for flight attendants. Someone had posted a thread asking for advice on career changes. The username seemed familiar, J. Corwin 88. The post read, "Blacklisted from all airlines due to a misunderstanding. Can't get hired anywhere. Lost my apartment. Does anyone know if cruise lines check FAA records? I'm desperate." The comments below were brutal. The aviation community knew the story. The video from the hangar leaked by a ground crew member had gone viral. Nobody offered sympathy. They only offered the harsh truth. Actions have consequences. Marcus turned off the iPad. He didn't feel joy at her suffering. He didn't feel gloating. He just felt a sense of balance. The universe had righted itself. David hopped into the right seat, looking fresh and energetic. "Ready to go, Captain." Marcus looked out the window. The sky was blue. The runway was clear. "Ready?" "David," Marcus said, releasing the brakes. "Let's fly." As the engines roared to life, Marcus Sterling didn't look back. He looked forward, up into the sky where he belonged, a king in his castle, flying high above the noise of small-minded people. This story is a brutal reminder that prejudice isn't just morally wrong, it's incredibly stupid. Jessica Corwin saw a black man and assumed criminal, blindly ignoring the fact that he was the highly skilled captain entrusted with a billionaire's life. She let her bias override her professionalism, and it cost her everything. Marcus Sterling showed us that true power isn't about screaming or making threats. It's about knowing exactly who you are and having the track record to prove it. In the end, karma didn't just slap Jessica. It evicted her from the industry entirely, while Marcus continued to soar. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Captain Sterling's shoes? Would you have let her apologize? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.